Joining us now, we have David Schoen, civil criminal rights attorney, Sara Carter, investigative reporter, Fox News, Gregg Jarrett, author of the #1 best-selling book, The Russian Hoax. Thank you all for being with us. Let's start, Sara, with you, because you're following this a little bit more closely than anybody, and we're going to get, I guess, these new messages out tonight that refer to the term sisters is used in there, and wouldn't that be FBI slang for the CIA, like sister agencies?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to delve a little bit deeper and find out exactly, and this is going to require interviewing everybody involved again, because it appears that they were not being truthful at all. Peter Strzok in his testimony to Congress, others that were involved, like Lisa Page. So they're going to need to question them again. They're going to need to get to the bottom of this. And what we know now is that, yes, of course, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all the same players that we were talking about before, Sean, all of these people that were getting these apparent scoops, these apparent stories out of nowhere, these leaks that were derogatory and that spread disinformation about President Trump are now connected to those high-level officials at the FBI, and I believe also we'll find out at other agencies like the CIA. And remember, we've discussed this before because James Clapper has been outed. It was a story that we broke early in the year that Clapper was under suspicion by the House Intelligence Committee and other committees investigating for leaking information on the dossier to the New York Times and setting up that meeting with Comey, that briefing that Comey did with then President-elect Trump and President Obama in order to get that information out into the media. I mean, this is seriously one of the biggest, most egregious acts against an administration, against a presidency in modern history. I mean, and this is coming from within their own, from within Washington, D.C. I mean, it's literally a silent coup. That is what intel sources have told me over and over again. There's no other way to describe this, and they utilized the media to make that happen.
Let's get your take from a legal standpoint. Leaking starts with James Comey, Gregg Jarrett, but more importantly with an ongoing investigation. But a lot of the information we know that they're leaking out is false propaganda, and the willing accomplices, of course, that they have in the media to go along with it.
Argued in my book, The Russia Hoax, the evidence I presented there is incontrovertible, and now we have more of it. There was leaking by Comey and his FBI, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, by James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence. John Brennan, CIA, we learned today, was also involved in these leaks. All of it with the goal of damaging Donald Trump with false evidence, which was based primarily on the dossier. And it's unconscionable for Peter Strzok's lawyer to put out, the way he did yesterday, a false statement trying to say, oh, no, my client is detecting and stopping leaks. That's disproven by the text themselves. Just look at that one text. Article is out, exclaims Strzok to Page. Well done, Page. That's not stopping a leak. That's leaking. And the leak was designed to damage Donald Trump.
But if you look at the timing, there was more than one period of leaking here. One was before the election and one is after the election.
Sure.
So one is designed to defeat Trump and the other is designed to destroy Trump. They never gave up.
It started on July 5th, 2016, when Christopher Steele, who composed the dossier, first met with Comey's FBI, and they leaked for more than a year thereafter, and the leaking continues still. And now we know why. Christopher Wray of the FBI, the director there, as well as Rod Rosenstein of the DOJ, has been obstructing this information from Congress because they know what they did was wrong and illegal, and this is a classic cover-up. Those guys need to go.
What do you think about it, David Schoen, and do you see illegality here and possible prosecution for them down the road?
Well, and I was thinking when you were laying out the case that this is the exact case that we should be hearing in this chronological order in a court of law, frankly. Sure, there's at a minimum obstruction of justice, which, goes both ways. But in this case, it's certainly on their part. Look, I think that you made the point that we have this before and after the election. That's why those who have called for a special counsel are right, I think, unfortunately, because we see the money wasted on special counsels. But we need someone who's going to put an entire picture on the systemic context here. You know, you said before, this is not just the FBI, it's also the DOJ. Remember, we're still getting these emails out in dribs and drabs. That shouldn't be happening. You might recall, and I'm sure you will because you reported it at the time, the DOJ even stonewalled their own inspector general at the time. He had to put together his own forensic team to find these emails that the DOJ said they supposedly couldn't find. We still don't have the personal emails. You know, I'm not Spartacus, but I still call for full transparency and full disclosure of all of these emails. We have to have it. It can't keep coming out in pieces and have to examine the person without all of the evidence. You know, when Strzok, you replayed that bit when Strzok said he's never lied under oath. I wonder what that qualification meant. I also wondered whether maybe he didn't say crosses don't count, at the time. We've got some major systemic problems here. I'm going to tell you, I think Sarah's breaking pieces, Gregg's context with the book, and your reporting will go down in history for this period once this stuff finally comes out.
A lot of people are beginning to doubt as to whether or not what we're saying about the declassification of, for example, 302s and Gang of Eight material, getting out every Strzok page, email and text message, and then, of course, the FISA pages, the 20 pages that everybody seems to want to see, whether that's going to happen. We don't have control of that, but the chatter is really loud that this is all going to happen. And I would say probably it's sooner than later, but we'll take a break. We're doing this for the whole hour. Gregg, David, and Sara. All right, as we continue, Sean Hannity Show, 800-941-SEAN is our number for the full hour now. We've got so much breaking news, new information, DOJ, FBI now colluding, conspiring to leak information to the press, both before President Trump got elected and then, of course, to destroy him after the election. We have more smoking gun information. Sara, one thing everybody keeps asking me, what you and Sara and Gregg and David, you all keep talking about the declassification, and these pages of the FISA memo are going to be unredacted and released to the public, and the 302s are going to be released to the public, and Gang of Eight information are going to be released to the public. And are we ever going to get all of the Strzok page emails, all of the contacts and information about Orange Steel? My sources tell me, yeah, it's coming. But people are saying, well, are you guys just crying wolf? Why shouldn't we get the information? Where's Spartacus Cory Booker to help us?
Yeah, Spartacus probably doesn't want this information coming out. I think people are, impatient for a good reason. It's been over 19 months, and there's been no evidence of collusion, and all we keep getting is more and more evidence of collusion going the other way between the DOJ and the FBI, with Hillary Clinton and Christopher Steele and Fusion GPS, as well as Russian spies actually giving information to Christopher Steele, and then Christopher Steele sharing that with the FBI, and the FBI so graciously sharing that now apparently with the rest of the country, so basically utilizing Russian disinformation. So I can understand why the American people are so frustrated. I can say, based on the sources that I've spoken with, just like you, Sean, I know you've got incredible sources. The sources that I've spoken with said this is absolutely going to happen. They will be declassifying these documents. Right now, of course, everybody is so concerned about the hurricane, and my hearts go out to, everybody in North Carolina and everybody in the path of the hurricane. So I think that the White House is doing the right thing. They're taking action. They're putting the hurricane first. And I think after that, we will definitely get these documents. And you know what's going to happen after that, Sean? Somebody is going to have to call for a thorough investigation with the Department of Justice into what went on here. Because now finally we're starting to see all the pieces fit together, just like you said. And this is going to be one of the biggest. And remember, we said this over a year ago. This is the biggest political story in our modern history. And there needs to be a thorough investigation. People need to be held accountable for this. The Justice Department is the one that's supposed to be in charge of it. If it's not Jeff Sessions, it definitely needs to be somebody else.
We're going to pick it up on the other side. We're going to stay with David and Gregg and Sara, and also the conflicts of Rod Rosenstein, as he is a witness in the case. He signed off on the final FISA warrant. Ultimately, he could decide something as important as whether or not Mueller gets a subpoena to interview President Trump or put him before a grand jury. All right, we'll get to all of that on the other side.
Didn't the IRS scandal and the NSA atrocities convince you? You need a watchdog on Washington with insider sources. You need Hannity every day.
The way we operate in the Department of Justice, if we're going to accuse somebody of wrongdoing, we have to have admissible evidence and credible witnesses. We need to be prepared to prove our case in court. And we have to affix our signature to the charging document. That's something that not everybody appreciates. There's a lot of talk about FISA applications. And many people that I see talking about it seem not to recognize what a FISA application is. A FISA application is actually a warrant, just like a search warrant. In order to get a FISA search warrant, you need an affidavit signed by a career federal law enforcement officer who swears that the information in the affidavit is true and correct to the best of his knowledge and belief. And that's the way we operate. And if it's wrong, sometimes it is, if you find out there's anything incorrect in there, that person is going to face consequences.
That person's going to face consequences. Well, nobody's corroborated a thing as it relates to the dossier, which was the basis, the bulk, the 95% plus of information that was in all of the FISA warrants. And we continue now, 25 now till the top of the hour, as we continue with Sara Carter, investigative reporter, #1 New York Times best-selling author, The Clinton Hoax, Fox News legal analyst Gregg Jarrett, and attorney, civil liberties, criminal rights attorney David Schoen is with us. I want to get to the specific question of Rod Rosenstein. Everybody knows that if, in fact, the president does declassify and then allows out these specific pages, I believe it's 10 through 12, 17 to 34, of the specific warrant that Rod Rosenstein signed, Gregg Jarrett. I'll let Sara get into the details. I've never seen them, but I hear it could be somewhat devastating to him personally, especially based on the remarks we just played of him. And then we know that he is, also the guy that signed off on the firing of Jim Comey. Now the question remains, how can he possibly be the guy that appoints Mueller? He's the guy that signs the FISA warrant. He's also a witness in the firing of Comey. He's up to his eyeballs and everything. Now he has the keys to the kingdom. In other words,
I mean, as I explain in the book, it is fundamentally wrong and unethical for Rod Rosenstein to supervise a case in which he's a chief witness and to simultaneously then judge whether a prosecution against somebody else should be brought. That's the equivalent of a prosecutor putting himself on the witness stand to testify in the very case he's prosecuting. A lawyer is not allowed to do that, and it violates the federal regulations that govern Rod Rosenstein, and yet he ignores all of that. But your point is a good one, and that is Rosenstein in the end is the guy who will decide whether Mueller has permission to serve President Trump with a subpoena to testify before a grand jury. And Rosenstein has every motive to abuse his position of power in doing it because he's trying to cover up his own wrongdoing by signing on to a warrant without evidence to spy on the Trump campaign. He should have been fired long ago. It's still not too late.
Okay, but if Rod Rosenstein, let's say the president Monday, Tuesday, or whenever, sometime next week, declassifies and allows to be released the unredacted FISA memos and the 302s that would probably make their way right to the office of Robert Mueller. I mean, at that particular point in time, they're now involved in the case at a very high level. What happens then, David Schoen?
Shut down the case. They'd have to shut it all down completely and say we are too conflicted to continue.
David, you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everything Greg has just said is right, and it's really unbelievable. I think you have to ask the question, why on earth would they keep Rod Rosenstein in this position? Again, it's not about personalities. It's not a government of men. It's government of laws. We have the appearance here of one of the most important so-called investigations in the history of the country. It has no appearance of integrity. It couldn't because of the conflicts. I have to make this point, though. You have to laugh if you've ever practiced criminal defense law and you hear Rod Rosenstein with this imprimatur of, federal agent, career officer, etc. It's true. Most of them, by and large, tell the truth every single day. But we have right here probably the best example in many, many years of someone who we know doesn't. Andrew Weissman got warrants in case after case in the Eastern District of New York, so-called organized crime cases in which he lied and misled in the warrants that he had his agents swear out. after that information was exposed, the same information he was excoriated by Judge Sifton for, after that was exposed, 4 different juries, 48 jurors heard the true evidence and acquitted every defendant before them who were supposedly big organized crime figures, all because of Andrew Weissman.
Well, I mean, we've talked all about that. Now, Sarah, let's get your take on it. So Rod Rosenstein, let's say the president ends up unredacting the FISA memo that he signed. And let's say that, as we believe, that it also tells us what we've already known is the bulk of information was taken from the phony, unverified dossier. That would mean that he failed in his duty to do the due diligence that we just played. He said that a law enforcement official would have to do, would have to take responsibility for, and there would be consequences against if he didn't. Well, then what happens from there? Does he get mad that Donald Trump has the power to declassify and unredact? Does he then say to Mueller, okay, it's a bad idea to subpoena him, but the hell with him, it's a war, and it becomes a personal battle because he's stuck in the middle of this whole thing?
Look, this is Rosenstein's FISA, the 4th and final FISA renewal that allowed the United States government basically to spy on an American citizen, Carter Page. That is Rosenstein's. And he also went out and spoke about we don't take these things lightly. Well, now he has to live up to his words. These redacted documents will be declassified by the president, and then Congress will go through them. They're going to make sure, and I know that the White House is going over all of these documents as we speak. I mean, the attorneys there have to be making sure that there's nothing national security related that could harm the country if it's released. But once those documents are given over to Congress, and once Congress turns that information over to the public, the American people are going to see the truth. And, you know, you can't try to make up a lie to fit your narrative. And once this comes out, Sean, I think that Mueller will have no other choice. They are going to have to back down. He is going to have to wrap up this investigation. Senator Burr just said yesterday that after 19 months of the Senate committee investigation, they still have not found one iota of evidence that there was any type of collusion or shenanigans between the Russians and Trump. At some point in time, this is going to have to end, but it's going to have to be up to the American people. It's going to have to be up to our Justice Department, and it's going to have to be up to our media to start doing its job and start informing the people of the truth.
Yeah, and Gregg Jarrett, I mean, at this point, there becomes a showdown. What does that mean? You're now giving the guy, you have Rod Rosenstein doesn't want something released. Otherwise, it would have been released a long time ago. The president is the one that makes the decision to release it. Then he now has the power to take vindictive actions, if you will, against the president for doing what needs to be done.
Well, if he seeks vengeance and retribution for the president declassifying documents that incriminate Rosenstein, that will be apparent to all. So I don't think he could do that. If he tries to do that, he deserves to be immediately fired and evidence against him presented to a grand jury for Rosenstein's own wrongful actions and potential indictment. So that's how it looks.
Yeah, well, it seems like that's a little too much power for one person. Now we've got another issue that is coming to the forefront, and that is, you know, with the relationship and revelations of the contacts between Bruce Orr and Christopher Steele, David Schoen, we now know, I think, and we're understanding more what the firewalls were that they wanted to hold when they were discussing issues 2 days before James Comey's testimony, and the fact that they were afraid that they were going to, quote, be exposed. But more importantly, I think the scary part of this is even though Christopher Steele himself wouldn't stand by his own dossier and his own findings and his own Russian lies, he was taking that information, funneling it through Bruce Orr, and both were talking about and conspiring to get it into his contacts in Rob Mueller's office. And we now know that person to be Andrew Weissman. Now the whole special counsel is tainted in this scandal.
Look, you've just listed again the evidence, an entire chapter of evidence that's all part of the same systemic problem and the same systemic agenda with all of these players involved. That may sound to someone like conspiracy theory. All you're presenting are the facts, and the facts support that. You cannot dispute the facts that you've presented, and that's why I think we need this thing presented in an overall picture to show how rotten all of this is, starting, of course, I mean, there's no surprises that Andrew Weissman would be at the heart of all of this. And for all of those folks who say, you know, well, Bob Mueller's a hero, etc., He knows Andrew Weissman inside and out. He knew exactly who he was picking for this job. He's known him for years. He chose him as his deputy FBI, and Weissman has an entire career of lying and cheating in these cases. Again, has been proven. It's not me talking. It's Judge Sifton. It's one after another result that he had. So, yeah, it's a major problem. And the frustration you spoke about that the American people have, quite frankly, if they look at the whole picture, is with the conflicts that exist at the Justice Department and the lack of full disclosure and the fact that people are still involved who are part of this agenda, intimately involved in this, and as you say, intimately involved in the cover-up and potentially a retributive prosecution. That's a dangerous and serious situation. Thank God we have three parts of our government here, and Congress has got to keep pressing for these documents. And the President, as we've said many times, has the Article 2 authority to declassify these documents and to take control of his Justice Department, not to avoid some prosecution for himself, to get the House in order. It's a Justice Department that works for the American people.
Everybody says that, but the minute that the President even contemplates removing Jeff Sessions or Rod Rosenstein or anybody else, we know, Saturday Night Massacre, he's trying to hide something.
That's a major story out there. And the press, we often in the past have depended on to bring out these facts. You have the press now actively engaged in wanting to either make light of the facts that you've brought out or simply continuing to conceal them. They don't report on things that are breaking stories.
Well, when have we ever heard that the CIA, quote, the FBI's sister, now we know that the FBI and DOJ, that they were conspiring, colluding to leak information to the press. And to quote Peter Strzok, think our sisters have begun leaking like mad, scorned, worried, political. They're kicking into overdrive. That means basically you have what Chuck Schumer warned everybody about, that, you take on the intel community, Sarah Carter, they'll get you 6 ways in Sunday. Well, clearly they were getting Trump 6 ways in Sunday.
Well, they weren't just getting Trump. I mean, remember, they went after Michael Flynn. And they wanted to get Flynn more than anybody. That was the first person that they were going to take down in the Trump administration. He was low-hanging fruit for them. They were already angry with him for years on end since he was in the Obama administration. Because why? Because he didn't buy into the narrative that Al-Qaeda and was on the run. He didn't buy into that narrative, and he fought the Trump administration on it, a lifelong Democrat, dedicated his life to the military, but it didn't matter. As soon as Flynn started going up against the CIA, going up against Brennan, going up against those guys that were in there, other people who I know as well, he was taken down. And Sally Yates, Bruce Orr's boss at the Department of Justice, went in and did that. And Sean, it is just devastating to us as a medium. The media is so important in informing the people. But because they bought into a narrative, because they wanted so badly, so many of them, to see Hillary Clinton as president, they chose to ignore what was going on. This is why Gregg's book is so important, because they chose to ignore what was happening with Hillary Clinton, and then they chose to sacrifice everything in order to ensure that President Trump would not become the president of the United States. And if he did, they would continue to go after him, and that's exactly what they did. This is when we have to realize as a nation that these agencies have so much power, too much power, and there needs to be a check and balance.
Gregg, the title of your book, I kept saying long before its release that is exactly what happened. The premise of your book from the get-go was dead on accurate and maybe even, if I may, worse than we thought.
It is worse. And every day brings more revelations of the venal conduct of those who first cleared Hillary Clinton and then framed Donald Trump with false evidence. It may take months, if not years, for a true accounting to be divulged. But Sean, that's how cover-ups work. The truth is slow to emerge, but we're getting more and more of it, that powerful forces at the FBI and the Department of Justice abuse their positions of trust. They subverted the legal process, and the media was acting in concert to condone or conceal this corrupt behavior. That is a threat to democracy, and reverence for the rule of law is lost when that happens. So, those of us who have been following this, you and Sara and David and others, we need to persist, because in the end, I believe the truth will emerge, and those who broke the law will be held accountable.
Thank you all for being with us. Informative hour. We'll have a lot more on Hannity tonight, 9